we were talking about before. We're talking about a whole bunch of other stuff. If the new idea happens to pan out and other folks want to start using it, and if it makes things actually easier, I don't really care where a good idea comes from. We can have some positive karma out of it. That sounds like a good deal.
Well, I mean, out of
Can
university.
you accept that what I'm doing is to prevent your karma getting effed over unnecessarily in all these proceedings? Can we just leave the door? I'm not saying you have to agree, but could we leave the door open?
I apologize for delving into territory I shouldn't have. I was completely violating what I just said.
No, it's fine. It's good territory. It's good to ask because, otherwise you're... That's why I kept bringing up that Deepak Chopra thing. It was like...
I don't really listen to a lot of Deepak Chopra. Well, I listened to Professor Keating's interview, but I realized maybe I should more.
It was him versus... no, I'm not asking you to do a deep dive on Chopra. Don't worry about that. It was his talk with Dawkins. So
I really need to listen to some more of...
The point is that it's 10 years old, and they were talking past each other, and maybe both of them are responsible, but it seems that the Dawkins people haven't really budged, and I feel like I'm doing a lot of work to do more than Chopra.
But a lot of that, Jen, is, and again, I didn't watch that, but I did at least listen to the Sargon Destiny thing from a few years back. And to be fair to that, no, all I know is I went back and I listened because I was within certain areas of the greater skeptic community. So I listened to it from Sargon's perspective. And then I listened to the thing again from Destiny. And Destiny's intro, dude said some of the wisest words I had heard. He's like, all right, here's my prediction. The people that like me will say I won, and the people that like Sargon will say he won. They finished up their 2-hour thing, and at the end, he asked his audience, he's like, okay, so you guys think I won? I think he peaked as like Sargon. So he's like, his folks think he won. It's like, there you go. This is why, especially if you use a lot of established arguments and stuff, this is why you can need something new or come at it from a different dynamic as well. Because a lot of these arguments, they've all been used before. And if you just keep on using the standard mimetic artillery and stuff, it's like, okay, are you actually getting a part perpetuating what's existing to simply exist? I'm just saying.
Well, it seems like you understand at least a little bit that it's not as straightforward as it seems, because
you give me great mimetic artillery. Thank you so much.
I mean, even just coming up with a title for the publication is not, you know what I mean? Like, what do we call it?
I mean, I'm totally for clickbait. So, I mean, eternal cyclic cosmology would make a lot of people happy. It's not necessarily wrong, at least for our purposes. We'll just parameterize that. We'll just have some notes.
Well, it would be nice to have something in it about causal closure and optimization of something. My original title
This is the thing that, depending on the level, sorry to cut you off, depending on the level of analysis, I'm like, what is the universe maximized for?
Efficiency within its own geometry.
How do we define it? Because I keep going black, and every once in a while,
mechanical efficiency.
That's my Bayesian. That makes sense. That makes sense. Adds up to 1. What if it adds up to more than 1?
Well, there's nothing inherently wrong with something adding up. What's the problem with something adding up to more than 1?
Now we're generating something.
Well, okay, you lost me here. What are we? What's the original question here? What are we talking about? So I can be clear.
Does the universe maximize complexity?
No. It has a finite, not finite, but it has a finite basis in complexity. Does that make sense, kind of?
Does it?
I don't know. You have to tell me.
This is a completely radical claim. No, there's a completely radical claim. But I'm just like, what? Okay, It's like regardless of whatever's going on, it's like if right, and you can use this geometric structure to help explain. Okay, here's electrons, there's protons, there's neutrons, there's black holes, and maybe even the universe itself from those geometries. Okay, I can start to conceptualize it, and if it's the simplest balance thing that makes sense, how the hell do you get from that to us?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead and ask the most complicated question of all time. Why don't you?
This is the thing, because it's like we have this. It's like, okay, what we've known in physics, a lot of this stuff we've known for about 50 some odd years. We have additional observations to help confirm things. It's like, okay, and then biology, you're seeing all this stuff. It's like, okay, we get this. Okay, you have certain vertebrates. You get this. Okay, we explain a lot of this. We think we can explain back to, I don't know, 10 to the negative 38 seconds after the Big Bang. But there's this kind of zone here where it's like there's a lot of hand waving, and I don't know. I saw something about a reptilian humanoid or something. Scalies are people too. I don't know. I don't know. It would be a radical thing. It would be a radical.
What's radical? It would be... Help me understand, because now I'm feeling sad.
I
don't understand what's
I'm
radical.
conjecturing that the universe may maximize for complexity, because that might.
Well, for every optimization, there's a for every maximization, there's a minimization. You just have to invert the coordinate system, right?
Oh no! My big thing from earlier that you and David were talking about is basically black and white being colors. I'm like, I think this was important to try to define how we perceive things, because, well, a wise woman once said, one of the easiest ways, essentially paraphrasing, to figure it out is take it to the limits.
It's so radical it calls you to go on sabbatical.
I like that. That was a good one.
You just had to interject that.
Yeah, just go on, just let us know. But well, this is the thing. It's a limit. You could say it's the polar opposite.
It's not just about evaluating limit points. It's about properly parameterizing a system so that the limit points are something we can interpret coherently. That's the real trick.
Yeah, and how the heck do we get the rods and cones? And then you got so
it's
many.
It's not relevant.
You get so much to that. I don't know. I'm playing my complexity card. I need to make. Okay, I'm gonna meme science into a game. I'm gonna use. This is the thing. They got all these other folks, and they're standing there in their fancy backgrounds with their ties and their cool shirts and stuff like that. Okay, I don't have that, but if I actually clean out some of my hard drive and actually put together some of the content that I used to about a year or so ago before I got more lazy, it's like, wait a second. I already did that with certain Yu-Gi-Oh cards and stuff. I'm like, oh, here's a Mirror Force card. Any insult you use on the internet, you open it yourself to the same vector of attack. I'm like, I'm just going to do that. I'm going to fucking summon Quaternions and stuff like that. We'll play it into other people's videos. We'll help get people excited. I'll use all the memes at my disposal. Whether it's from Anna, dude, I was explaining to somebody else the other day. It's like how I learned that photons actually spin and stuff like that before I was introduced to Sir Roger Penrose's old lectures and stuff like that on twistor theory. It's like, dude, here's this blast from Dragon Ball Super. He's doing a final Kamehameha. The thing kind of spins around the outside. I'm like, oh, these are things that resonate with me. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, people love science and stuff like that. And if you could take something from something that they already like and be like, how would you actually do something like this? How would you put a blast of particles in this thing? And maybe they'd start mathing it up. And if we got more folks mathing it up and doing useful things, and maybe we can incentivize people to actually do it via NFTs and stuff like that. All I'm saying is we should start selling engrams of cool mathematical shit.
Shouldn't we make sure that we don't cause bad karma?
It's completely, we're incentivizing artists and everything. Although, do we need to consider idolatry as well? Okay, that could be something else there. Okay, these are other missions that I have for other people. I apologize. I'm showing too much of my hand, aren't I?
No, idolatry is another mysterious, poorly understood thing. It's the rhetoric of fanatics.
My thing is I'm also kind of a pragmatist. It's like, okay, I'd like more people to do this, but I realize having a proper incentive structure to actually do it, maybe kind of like
Do what? Do
game.
what though? Right? Like everything is bottlenecks at your own. Sorry, everything bottlenecks at your own understanding.
Right.
What you wish
Right.
other people were doing is just what you can't do yet.
Right.
So you just got to reframe the question so that it's solvable. So is what you're doing right now working? Like, how do we know that what we're doing is working?
It's a good question. I don't necessarily know, but I notice just random thing. I'm noticing some more physics people kind of starting to follow me on Twitter that I don't necessarily. I don't know. Again, it's just the internet. And maybe it's just folks like me, just kind of like, oh, there's a physics dude. Let me click on this. Oh, April 6th, he's premiering a video. This is very interesting.
Now you're a total weirdo internet denizen who can't carry on a straight conversation, saves on life, but compared to me, you're fucking normal to the extreme. So enjoy that.
I mean, I would push back on that. I just have the ability to at least decently be tolerated by enough people. I just don't get invited to a lot of places because of different reasons, but I'm okay with that. Long game.
Well, the way I look at it is you're the bottleneck to your own achievement. So you got to be happy with what you're doing. And for me, diagrams sometimes really make me real happy.
I still think that thing you painted is probably one of the most useful objects. Can you send me the original file? Because I want to send that to like Dad if you didn't already, just because that's art. And it
You're
describes it
so
very
sweet to
well.
say that, but I don't know which
it's
one
the
you're
most
talking about.
simplistic representation I've seen. Because what does this thing? It goes through. It does its loop. It goes through its loop, and you're doing it with lines and stuff. I'm like, okay, there's got to be at least folks out there in different communities and stuff like that that have particular modeling software. Because I've seen people do very simple things, and I've asked some of these people, what type of software? Well, it's a proprietary software. I can't disclose. Okay, no worries, no worries. Is it possible to model something to like link to Professor Segment's video? It's like it would be very difficult, but I believe yes we can. And I've asked a couple of different people that are pretty good at design, and it's possible. And the visualization. All I know is
I
cool
wanted to know what you
visualizations.
thought about the chat with Euler, if you caught it, or if you didn't, no problem.
Oh no, that was fun. You guys basically seem to be homing in on a really strong consensus there.
How were we holding a consensus exactly?
Well, you guys ended on basically your stuff, right? You were basically describing like your stuff and that stuff and kind of the intersects there. See, I thought they got to like factorizing and like fractals and stuff like that. And once I start hearing people doing stuff like that, I'm like, oh, if a lot of the stuff is based upon this, I mean, maybe it'll be expressed in a different way just because mathematics, it's like, oh, as long as it's combinatorially equivalent, it's like, doesn't really matter.
Fuck all, because God's like, fuck you. No offense. But it's nothing's particular to you. It's
Well,
just
I don't know
thing.
what matters. I'm just saying if it's combinatorially, we can eventually deduce what may be the closest thing to what's going on.
But we may not understand the thing that's going on. So why do we
That's a lot
want
to understand what's going on.
Well, don't we want what we can understand first and foremost? And
I mean,
isn't
that
that
would
more
be
important
useful.
than knowing? Well, if we can't understand what's going on, then what's the point of pursuing trying to understand it? Something we know already we can't know.
Because we're human. Because we
So
want
I'm
to know. Isn't it built into us that we want to know that which we cannot know? If whatever you tell us we can't do, we want to do it.
There's a difference between pushing the boundaries of your own limitations and violating the laws of physics.
Well, I mean, all I know is I don't expect to do it myself, but if I could lay out a path that would maybe help other people continuing that journey into the future, and if it's a positive journey, I'm all for that.
It depends how the technology is used. If it's used to justify extant biases, it's not good. If it's used as a tool for self-improvement, it is good. So if I'm being cagey, it's because I don't want the net effect of what I'm doing to be negative. And it's not just out of a selfish desire for my own pride or a karmic trace. It's out of genuine concern for human achievement.
You don't want to fuck everything up. I hear you. Pardon my French.
I mean, if you look at civilization, what do you think are the biggest civilizational flubs, like lessons that we just maybe still haven't learned? Like for sure, one of them is pollution.
Rule one of the internet: don't believe everything on the internet. That's my contribution. Oh no, the environment and shit like that, dude. We've been screwing Mother Earth for years. It's just a bad juju. It's probably gonna come back and screw us. Actually, it already has in a lot of ways. I also, a lot of smart people I asked, like everyone, all I know is even the dude that was like the head of the Human Genome Project back however many years ago in like the 90s or something like that. At one point, I was at a talk he was at the Harvard Club a number of years back, and I asked him, like, what are the 2 top things you believe we can do to help save the world? And since his talk was basically on like the Human Genome Project, genetics, and the sheer fact the prices come down from like $1 million to $600 at that point, I think it's like $200 now to basically have like your full genome, right? Maybe $300, like the price of an iPhone or something. But all I know is at that point, it's like get as many people's genome fully sequenced, because now we'll have that metadata. We can help see different corollaries between different diseases and stuff like that, and basically help set a generation where we might actually have custom tailored medicine depending upon the individual, which would probably solve a lot of problems. That and climate change. So basically, a lot of smart people that. I'm sorry about that completely tangential side segment there, but yeah.
In short, you're saying pollution and climate change are things that we still haven't really solved civilizationally, and that these are big things to look into.
I'd say communication between each other is probably one of the number one things we need to solve. I mean, go planet, but right.
I mean, don't we have more communication than ever before?
Right, but
we need more communication still.
I'm talking about minimal noise, like mimetic noise transference. Like, what happens if, like,
okay, so that's really abstract. That's really abstract.
I wish more people trusted each other and we could actually deal with each other like
how
human beings.
How can you take ownership of building a high trust society?
Trust people?
Oh no, only do high trust incentivizing things. Blindly trusting everybody is a way to get a low trust society, because it's not warranted to blindly trust everybody.
Like trust but verify.
Instead of throwing asinine, vacuous platitudes in my face, why don't you consider what I'm saying for a change?
Yeah.
So what does trust but verify have to do with anything here?
Have you considered how that could be constructed?
Well, you're the one who said it, so why don't you explain what it means?
Okay. No, you trust somebody's going to be acting.
Who's being trusted but verified? Why the hell would you trust but verify anybody? That's completely shifting the burden of proof from what it normally is.
Okay.
I mean, come on. Who's going to actually do that?
Well, I mean, how has the other form been working for a lot of folks?
I don't know, but there's not just 2 forms, but it's about primarily what's realistic, I think. So to say go out there and just give everyone the benefit of the doubt, that's just not going to work, because there's no way to verify that everybody's actually going to participate meaningfully that way.
You probably have a very difficult time establishing universal axioms. If you're going to say that you're going to accept some form of universal humanism, but obviously,
well, you don't want a lot of rules. But folks don't like
people could disagree, saying that even Aristotle
tolerate
form determines function, and conflict is the natural order, and take a zero-sum attitude towards life, where there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers, and your goal is to be from the winners, or if you're going to take some universalistic approach where you're going to try to avoid there being losers, and be willing to detract from what you could potentially garner for yourself in order that some minimum standard. And then if you also recognize that if you posit universal humanism, that the rest of humankind may not agree with that postulate, and how you're going to deal with that. And can you be a universal humanist if even the majority of the other humans disagree and believe in group competition in a zero-sum nature?
Well, how's anybody going to try it if nobody else is actually doing it?
Well, so are you accepting universal humanism as a fundamental axiom? And because if you don't accept universal humanism, your solution to these problems could be substantially different.
I don't know what universal humanism is. I just know that people be people.
Well, is it universal humanism in the general sense of not like a biblical sense, but a modern Enlightenment sense that there's some common humanality,
family of humanity.
Yeah, family of humanity, working that all universal basic human rights, and some sort of global direction towards humanity, as opposed to other schools that say there may not be universal human rights, there may not be a global direction towards humanity, and in opposition to universal humanism, as opposed to a natural order of conflict and group conflict, where it's saying that, like, no, there are groups, and the natural state of groups is to be in conflict. And universal humanism is not just idealistic; it's an accurate description. And I mean, so you could argue against universal humanism one thing, like, okay, it's worse for me, or you could argue that it's a flawed idea in general, and that'll be worse for everybody. And then in terms of problems that need solutions, like environmental crises, that might work better if you had universal humanism, universal all people working towards a common goal. And then obviously the tragedy of the commons, that just a factor, tragedy of the commons, we're going to destroy the world, and you're just going to be a sucker if you fall for universal humanism. You're just going to be a sucker that's on the short end of the stick, and you would do more for yourself in the world to just try to get the most for yourself, or your group, or however you see it.
Well, all I know is I'm a privileged son of a gun, and things like this actually give me purpose. And all I know is, if it does end up being true, that if we could actually get over ourselves, and within the next 50 or even 100 years, we could have the potential to actually have like Star Trek level stuff, like an actual like 5D printer being able to replicate.
How good do you think it could be if all anybody was ever thinking about was abstractions like this? How good do you think it could be? I mean, have you seen Red Dwarf when they accidentally
I need to watch this. That was one of my original characters. I was a dwarf. Yes, of course.
Which one? Which character?
Jen, this is why I always ask on Twitter whenever I see like a weird food or an artificial food or something grown in the lab. I have had tasty vegetarian burgers, so I am integrating that. So I'm like, all right, if I didn't know that was a vegetarian burger, again, it wasn't a vegan burger, but it was a good vegetarian burger. I'll totally give it that. My thing is, I always ask, is it tasty? Is it tasty? And I'm willing to necessarily have a compromise if it could actually help solve world hunger. There aren't long-term effects and everything. Because what also gives me hope is within that next 50 to 100 years, I'm expecting us to have finished actually having feasible fusion reactors, like with the Princeton Nautron and everything. Okay, you're starting to use certain figure eight motions as well to try to help maximize whatever they're trying to do, trying to minimize the amount of additional magnetism they need to help the plasma maintain its shape. And multi-layer graphene and twisted graphene there seems to have much higher ability to conduct superconductively at higher temperatures as well. These different things, the ability to generate power, the ability to transfer power with minimal, if any, loss as well, with the requisite engineering technology, why the heck wouldn't we shoot for this? Like, give people some freaking hope. Maybe they'd have a bit more of a positive attitude and be the actual generation that could be like, oh my God.
Do you think the unrealistic expectations are causing people to be discouraged?
I think people just want some hope. They want something new. They've been getting told.
But you're not even okay. This is the second time I've asked you a question that you've completely ignored and started on a filibuster. You notice that?
Yes.
It would be helpful to at least
I forgot what the
pretend
question was.
to answer my question. I don't even remember now, but it was on topic.
Anyway. How am I going to do something?
You keep saying how you wish things were. You're not focusing enough on how things are.
Okay. Yeah, that's why I'm gonna pitch a lot of science and stuff as games utilizing memes that probably work for people like me and within my generation, and might bring some folks in and actually get them interested in different other people that are probably doing a lot harder work than I am. It's just trying to spread the knowledge around. Get people interested. Science.
Can you account for the success of science?
I mean, we're here. Basically, I'm staring at some may say, depending on the time
technology.
In history, a magical
That's called technology. That's not science. That's technology.
Well, I mean, isn't it a derivative of science?
To point to a computer as a success of science is to say, I can't account for the success of science. You're basically conceding you have no idea.
Oh, I have no idea how this works. I just click some buttons and it does some things.
So you don't see the issue with then turning around and, assuming you know other things if you can't account for something as simple as why science works.
Well, you just account for as many variables as you can and keep on working your way through it.
Aren't you supposed to account for as few variables as you can?
Okay. You want to be able to rule out any noise variables. Let's say the infinite number of additional things that you're not supposed to be able to account for, and then have it be operating by the minimal amount of parameters. I think. I'm not an experimentalist, really.
Well, that's the argument behind having so few cardinalities of numbers. Parsimony, isn't it?
When you say cardinality, are you talking about matrices or?
I'm saying there's no cardinality between the rationals and the reals, I think. Some kind of necessity.
When I hear that, I think radians. So I would technically use like 360 and a degree thing. I think there's like, you do pi. I wonder what happens. What if we just set pi to 1? What does that do?
We can do that, but it doesn't matter because you're just chasing the dragon until you agree to stop somewhere. It's like, what's pi? What's the circle? What's any of it? It's like, it's all interrelated. The way to start making sense of things is to go outside of the current domain and try to calibrate somehow, i.e., what is it that's making us able to do science? It's not technology. Technology basically means we're really good at manipulating materials. So that means we have a really good, I suppose, solid state model and really good extraction of energy. And that's why science works.
Is it our brain?
Are we really going to say that's why science works? Because what I was told in school was that it was predictive models that made predictions that was the value of science.
I thought it was inductive reasoning.
Well, the idea is that making the predictions over and over is inductive. If you repeatedly test a hypothesis, the idea is that you're repeatedly testing a hypothesis that has made predictions before. That's the induction. We keep saying, oh, gravity, this formula works for it. We keep using it. It keeps working. That's the induction, is the repetitively using a theory. Limit as n goes to infinity, it becomes more accepted. It's less a hypothesis, more a theory. But in theory, scientifically, you should always be able to come in and improve it. but we're reaching the limit now of what people can reasonably understand as a model. Computers are coming up with better models than us at this point. And that was that article I was sharing before about the density functionals is like, oh, there's already basically density functional. It's already basically the main use of AI.
Well, I mean, I think that's what Dr. Wolfram at one point said. He was just like, oh, I enjoy geometrically heavy density gradients for searches or something like that. Because if you find enough localities and stuff like that, it's probably what that person's looking for.
And you could separate, morals, ethics, and governance from science. That science could be moral neutral, that you're purely talking about an understanding of how the material realm operates, and that is moral and ethical neutral. So to say that if this theory works, the theory could be used to hurt or help people. That's not a scientific concept. Like in terms of engineering, that this is how the material realm operates, and that could be used to create technologies that hurt or help people. And like a Feynman, just the joy of figuring things out. And you might be able to separate, you could have intentions of goodness, but it's probably separate from the joy of figuring things out, that I purely enjoy figuring things out. And then there's a separate realm of the morals and ethics to the application of the idea.
Holy crap, Jen, this little diagram thingy on the pressure article. I'm looking at this. Is it just me, or do those look like a whole bunch of Clifford tori? Remember the spinny things that almost gave you like a tummy ache the other day? The toruses that kept spinning and kind of geometrically. Yeah, that's what Thad used to model the HF8 or its complement.
So, have you thought any more about what I said about slowing down from infinite speed as a viable model?
It terrifies me because it lines so many things up. And when I was starting to listen to that lecture the other day, I'm like, wait, did he literally just set a 0 point? I'm like,
wait, which lecture are you talking about here?
The one that they released the same day at the IHS as the same day we were doing the eternal cyclic cosmology. This, and again, the more and more I look at science, I'm like, okay, I'm not saying this is an eternal cosmic wave function that's lining certain things up, but I'm like, what's being described here sounds very much like we may have been describing earlier. And all I know is I heard something about like maybe I think it was a double cover. And all of a sudden I heard something about a holographic principle being applied that he wasn't exactly sure about how that was working. I'm like, this is very interesting. And all I know is the point where I hear Professor Ed Witten, he makes a statement saying, well, if you were to take this to the limit, then you would be in supergravity per se, or something like that. And when the response from the gentleman is something that I've heard Jonathan say a number of times, indeed. Basically, he stated it as almost, I found the fundamental flaw in your argument. And he's like, yes, obviously, yeah, no, that's what we're doing. And it's like, that's very interesting. Continue.
Well, light has infinite complexity, so our brute forcing algos should be pointed at light, not towards matter, which is what they're currently pointed at, because matter is much more easily parameterized. Like we can, integrate that QMPT information
But are we
in a way that doesn't tax the fucking compute power of the system. Excuse me. Thank you very much.
I mean, well, these are things we need to solve and stuff. And apparently, at the LHC, they've upgraded the computers recently while they've been shut down. And apparently, before they were able to get like 1/40th of the information because they'd throw a lot of it away, and then they do that. Now they're going to be able to analyze almost all the information and then still set the parameters for what they're going to try to measure, which that should help as well. But I mean, some of it, and again, maybe it's just an engineering thing. It's like, do we have the particular technology to accurately parameterize for these measurements of light? Or are we running ourselves to the limit here, or have we just been spending most of our time probing mass?
It's both. Obviously, chemistry is entirely like, what's the Gibbs free energy?
Yeah. Oh, on a much lighter note, I didn't do a video on this, but I thought about this several months ago, and now I'm not sure if it was you or somebody else showed me a way to put either a compound or a liquid that can hold an extreme amount of energy. And it just got me thinking of Sonic the Hedgehog and like, oh my God, we can make super sneakers. So what happens if you were to take something, enclose it in a form of a membrane, kind of like they did with air and those old pump shoes and everything, and they could have a pressurized material like a super fluid, like almost gas or something there. If you exerted a little pressure, would it react with you being able to like jump really high in the air or something? It sounds very dangerous.
So, like, what?
It's like flubber.
Hang on a
Basically
minute.
flubber.
The effect on a trampoline, but times a million, basically. The stealing the bounce thing, right?
No. I'm just saying, and again, you would need to parameterize something that could enclose it. So you need to do the engineering up to that point, at least. But right now, if we have a way to pressurize certain gases and stuff like that, and if it wouldn't necessarily lose energy, or maybe over time and stuff, because you used to still have to pump up those sneakers. But if you were to have that, like you get a kid jumping, they're like shooting 100 feet. Okay, it's dangerous. We need to calculate well. I think it'd be fun. See, these are the things, and even like with elders and stuff like that, a lot of folks have trouble getting up. Dude, the ability to fabricate like lightweight, almost like exoskeletons, and like even just a knee brace, just taking a lot of this different technology and stuff. Like, dude, we could craft some amazing things, and at least, yeah, if we're still in a cash system and stuff like that, yeah, people can make a lot of money, but if we can help bring the cost down and help bring the benefit to a lot of people. And if we help incentivizing, I don't know, maybe utilizing social media and stuff for good, something like that, it's like, okay, we're incentivizing, we're helping people within our different communities and stuff like that. Now you just get the benefit of, okay, I also can feel good about myself because I'm doing some good works. And you know what? If you happen to help contribute to the engineering, the actual construction and stuff of these things, hey, there's nothing wrong with like doing good work and getting compensated for it. My take. That's all I got.
Well, it sounds like you certainly haven't supposed your own conclusion. Oh, wait, that entire filibuster was entirely in support of a foregone conclusion without any consideration of whether it was well founded.
Yeah.
So I put a new article out anyway. I'm trying to go into consciousness. It's turning into much more writing than I thought it would, but hopefully by the end of it, it's a little more clear what I'm referring to in terms of this model. And I do think, people should be able to some extent use it already, but it is somewhat abstract. I admit that. But maybe that's part of why it works, because it's so general and abstract. Just on another topic, if we want to move on, this really interested me on Psychology Today about associations between colors and emotions. Well, they're saying in the article that they're universal. Like, I don't know if I buy that, but super interesting nevertheless to see what colors were associated with what emotions. And there was one sort of a royal blue.
It follows the form of Yoda. Anger leads to hate.
I just wanted to list the ones associated with royal blue. They seemed really interesting. Interest, pride, contentment, sadness, admiration, and relief. So if blue had a color, if blue had a feeling, it would be a mashup of those. If blue had a color. Woo!
Oh, blue is the best flavor.
Give me some blue drink right now. It's really interesting to see that red is just the red one's really interesting too. I don't know if you can see them. They should be on the.
It has a very strong component in different things. It's interesting.
I could look at this for a long time. Like so far, I'm just looking at the positive emotions, but all the bleak ones have probably not as much information, but some information too. Yeah, that's the thing, Titan, about red. It's not universally anger. The way I've been looking at it is just making lists. Well, I've only made one list. So if you made the list for red, it would be love, pleasure, joy, pride, anger, hate, fear, shame.
It's kind of passion.
Yeah, and then we'd be looking to generalize the qualities underlying that pattern if we wanted to. But if we actually did want to do something scientifically, this would be a good starting point. I'm not saying it's a for sure thing because I'd want to calibrate those. I feel like those colors aren't quite calibrated. Like, how many colors do they let them pick from? Okay. Do they let them pick from a finite set of colors, or do they show them
you need to
a
look to see the
tableau of
whole.
continuously deforming colors?
How was the study conducted, the participants, and everything like that? This is why, like, you look at how it was conducted, because I mean, you can say anything like there, but it's like you want to have like at least a well thought out experiment. But I mean, just on a first glance, I'm like, okay, I can see how that's kind of the case.
So it seems to point to some deeper truth. Is that what you're saying? This diagram here?
I'm just saying wavelengths probably, they likely affect us in ways that we probably haven't accounted for yet. And I think we can try to start accounting for them a bit more. That's what.
Well, remember, we have a model that goes from 3 + 1 to 7 to 118. There's how you account for the one and the many. It doesn't matter if the one is 3 + 1. I mean, nobody has ever cared.
People do care.
You don't know what people care about. People care about whether something works. I mean, calculus should prove that.
Yeah, but quantum mechanics works.
But we can't account for that either. Okay, we've got science, calculus, and quantum. Who can actually account satisfactorily for the success of those three? Now, Daryl is in the chat's going to say, quantum mechanics hasn't brought us anything in 100 years. It's no good. I don't agree with that, because without it, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing right now. So
here's the thing. Knowledge without action, it being articulated to others in a way that could have a form of implementation. I mean, how many folks maybe had great ideas? Maybe they didn't have a formalized education. Maybe they perished too early because they didn't have enough to eat. You never know. Maybe they were killed in a war. What was it? Like one of the guys that solved Einstein's equations.
Maybe they just filibustered for so long that the world ended in the meantime.
I do a lot of that. All right, you're right. I need to get back to action on that. I need to go grab some dinner and actually finish my other things. So, but thank you for having me on,
Let's
Jen.
please go into the ideas, because I want to see you using that really powerful software in a way that's actually as a multiprocessor, the way it was intended. You got to be able to visualize it first. The pseudocode is the bottleneck of the code, is it not? Maybe just have a think about it.
You're right.
Sorry to be so
learn how to code. No. I meant to do this last year. I violated what I said I was going to do. I said I was going to learn to code last year. I did not. Thank you, Jen. I will learn to code.
I'm not saying learn to code.
Hold me to that. Jubin, I might need your help, but peace out, everybody. I'll see you
later. I don't know how to code. Anyway, see you later. I don't know how to code.
Okay, man. Yeah, keep it up. Blessings.
I don't know how to code. I'm trying to get him to. I mean, I was thinking he was going to go back to his legalizing duels, rant. I didn't want to. I don't want him to get stuck.
You want to wrap up? Anything else? Did you talk about your article?
I don't think so. At all. It's pretty short. I really wanted, I guess, to share the panpsychist Lex Fridman, Philip Goff exchange, see sort of the state of the conversation.
Well, he's been making the rounds, like you said. I mean, he's got the confidence here that, so to say, the hard problem of consciousness can't be answered in the current paradigm of science, that he could put panpsychism out there as a reasonable alternative, or at least the explanatory power, and also kind of the non-deistic dualism, that without calling panpsychism a form of dualism, and just saying that there could be this consciousness phenomenon that maybe classically is most similar to what people would call the spiritual realm, but that it's could be investigated scientifically in a non-deistic manner. And that's largely what I'm trying to do. Also, I was talking about the imaginary numbers, and like, okay, I might be a religious person with a religious belief system, but I'm not here necessarily promoting my belief system or religion. I'm more taking a scientific approach to dualism. And so like I've been watching Goth making his rounds. Probably opens the door for people like me and you. And that's what I meant by terming understanding the terminology, the lexicon of the current paradigm, and phrasing your understanding within the lexicon that is the current dominant lexicon. And there's a lot of confusion about non-deistic spirituality, like new, and it's not even spirituality. I mean, it's okay, I'm a spiritual person, believe in it, but if we're just talking about consciousness, some sort of dualistic explanation of the phenomenon, that mind is separate from our body, and to come up with a scientific explanation based on that. And as opposed to positing like a spiritual realm and souls, positing that consciousness is this all-pervasive phenomenon in the cosmos.
I don't think the mind can be separate from the body under panpsychism. I think the body would be a subset of the mind field under panpsychism. So separate's not really the right
that might be your more
word.
system. I mean, you're getting more. I mean, that's what I'm trying to stop you from doing is explain. When you explain what someone else says, explain it accurately. When you want to explain what your model is, what your theory is, explain what your model is and your theory is. When you want to explain what someone else is saying, explain what they're saying, not what you're saying.
Sure. He's not saying too much, other than it solves the boundary problem between consciousness and non-consciousness.
Yeah, I mean,
and he furthermore said that if you start with consciousness, you can get everything else, which seems like a very bold claim made with what appeared to be scant justification.
Yeah, I mean, just a level. If you say, you can have you can have an atheistic, dualistic understanding, like I said, like a Big Bang. And just like the Big Bang created, the material phenomenon, it also created the conscious phenomenon, or even, if you're going to call it the spiritual realms, or, just like an uncreated universe, that there always existed a material universe, there always existed this realm of consciousness. And, then at a different level, where you're not talking about one realm being higher or descending from the other, you're talking about two independent realms that interact, where consciousness is a pervasive phenomenon in all of the cosmos and interacts, or are you saying it has some sort of causal agency over the material realm, and that's not just in so like sentient and higher beings, but in all material phenomena? You could explain like consciousness is the source of theology, not just in organic functions, but in all of the material realm. I think that in the debate with Dawkins and Chopra. It's been a few years since I watched it, but Chopra claimed that Freeman Dyson says that electrons have consciousness. And Dawkins was like, "You lie! I demand that you apologize to Freeman Dyson for falsely stating what he says." And so I'm not sure.
It's a good question. Are you saying, like, does panpsychism imply electrons are conscious?
Well, it's saying it applies theology, and it's saying that electrons, the reason why things follow that, like, the law consciousness could be defined as the laws of nature, and so the reason electrons, so to say, follow the laws is because of consciousness, is because some sort of theological purpose, or you could say even more than that, but it's saying that consciousness could be a separate phenomenon that's like a Penrose-Hameroff that is only harnessed by like microtubules and higher functioning states that have these microtubules or mechanisms to harness it, or that consciousness is a pervasive phenomenon of all of the material realm, and that even in electrons or quantum material, that there is some aspect of consciousness that's causal.
Yeah, I like the way you frame that.
Or you could have a Leibnizian, dualistic understanding where there's nothing causal about consciousness, that's dualistic. There's two separate realms, and there possibly could be interaction, but it's not causal. There's nothing causal about consciousness.
How can there be interaction that's non-causal? I mean, an interaction appears to mean that some
causal implies like a hierarchy, and saying that the material realm operates according to laws, and that would be like decision making, like the soul, that my soul doesn't cause my body to exist, but the soul has a decision making capacity of my body, but there's nothing causal about the spiritual realm to the material laws. The material realm laws operate completely independently of the spiritual realm, and consciousness has a relationship like of to my body, in the fact that my soul, there's a connection between consciousness and my body, and maybe decision making and perception, but there's nothing causal about it. And it even come to like a free will type question. You could have consciousness without free will.
Well, not to be pedantic, but it does kind of depend on the definition of consciousness. And that has been a massive stumbling block, because we're stuck within a self-referential loop that doesn't actually go anywhere with regards to resolvability, consciousness, awareness.
Yeah, I mean, he's just kind of vague in like general platitudes of panpsychism, but you would have to get into like forms and categories, and like I was talking like mathematics, and have some sort of hard definition of the dividing line of the material and non-material realm, and the functionalities of what functions occur within the materiality and what functions occur within consciousness. And you could also like panpsychism and try to claim that consciousness is some sort of material phenomenon, but most likely, if you're a panpsychist, you're saying that consciousness is a non-material phenomenon. But you could be in the school of panpsychism, and that could be a monist who believes that there's some sort of separate unit that arises to materiality and consciousness. Or you could say that consciousness is the monistic unit that is causal of the material realm and the source of the material realm.
I think that's more what he was saying, because he said if you start with consciousness, you can get everything else. So that to me seemed like quite a strong panpsychism, almost a monistic panpsychism. I don't know if he would.
Yeah, and he's more outlining like a broad philosophical precursors within the language of science, and the multiple truth hypothesis would probably still you would need that still within the school of panpsychism, let alone other explanations. But yeah, it could be widening the net. And one thing, okay, you don't have to prescribe to some sort of like ancient religious tradition to
how do you know that? Who else has any answers?
Well, the questions don't need answers.
Okay.
It just needs framing. And so you could use the scientific method. So you're saying you're not going to use ancient traditions within the scientific method. You're going to be like, oh, no, but now that you've accepted panpsychism, now you're going to accept my ancient scriptures and teachers as, say like, no, it's still going to be the scientific method, and it's just going to have a better feel for what answers are there and where do they lie, and saying even if you say that they're like non-material phenomenon could still be measured, and or the effects of them. So you might not be able to directly measure them in a material form, but you could measure the effects and you could measure the correlation. Just like I said, the neural correlates of consciousness, you could, if the brain is a receptor, you could try to measure the activity of the brain in understanding of its relationship to receiving something that is out. And if it's something that is non-material. So even, you talk about Penrose-Hameroff hypothesis and orchestrated objective reduction as a receiving quantum phenomenon, or you could talk about the brain receiving something that's non-material, but still that would have correlates.
Be, and if it's presumed to be coming from the brain, I don't really get any answers. But if we understood the brain was part of the cycle of consciousness, then the role it plays in the cycle of consciousness might become more obvious. But the level of discourse is not really there yet. Like, I don't know how many of these like Friedman shows you've watched, but how many of them have referenced a term as basic as dualism? Maybe a few, but not too many.
Because most people don't have classical training in philosophy. They haven't read the classics. I was watching the Glenn show, Glenn Lowerly and John McWhorter, and he had was it I forget the school, that like the St. John's, that has the great book, University in Michigan, private university, that has a great book program for their undergraduate degree, where over your undergraduate degree you read a selection of like 100, 200 of the great books from the historical canon. That's really rare these days. And even within top level scholarship of experts in the field, that they will have actually read the classics. Maybe they read a handful of the classics of, even like in politics, going back to read like the basics of law and like Hegel and Kant, but a broad reading of the classics. And just like talking, like I was harping on you for your anachronization, for not having studied the history of science or math, to realize when these ideas, how these ideas came to arise, the time frame that they came to arise in a relationship to each other, uh, and then to actually have read some of the literature. To say people might know calculus, but okay, do they have to actually read Euler or Leibniz or Newton? And so that's pretty rare. And also the level, saying that saying renounce yourself from entertainment. Time is short. There's there's hundreds of thousands of books that need to be read. Saying even if you start now and renounce yourself from everything else, you're still just going to be able to scratch the surface. Euler, wrote tens of thousands of pages. All these great minds filled up shelves a book of literature and saying we don't even have really like, I mean, there is still, I share the videos from the Royal Society. I didn't share any this week, but I mean, okay, the Royal Society still exists, but it's not really a center of anything before it's became decentralized. And, there's more, I mean, there's still like a Nobel Prize, but it's really now just financial and independent minds. There, people within universities, or there's, conferences like the Science of Consciousness. But there really isn't such a phenomenon. It's unlikely there will be like a Royal Society where you'll have century collected, purposeful um, academy of the great minds. So maybe on the internet, it could be, even if that's unlikely, that you might have subsects like Brian Greene and certain names that might speak with each other, just like the alt right, or Richard Spencer and JF and Ethan Ralph, or like speak with each other. So too like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Mika Kuku and Brian Greene, or however these names might occasionally speak to each other. You might see some on the Lex Friedman podcast. It's not really a replacement of what the Royal Academy once was. And so in that sense, ideas still spread. You still have communication. There's still somewhat of level. So it's like, the olden days, someone like Philip Goth may have, like there would have been the weekly gathering at the Royal Academy, or if there was, just Berlin and Paris and London, where someone, their idea, and they would speak at those academies. And so it's like that still somewhat, that like Philip Goff might participate in the Models of Conscious Conference and the um, uh, Science of Conscious Conference. He might be on Lex Friedman and Joe Rogan. He even spoke to T Jump. Like maybe even we could get, you mentioned McFadden or something like that. Maybe we could even get in those circles and speak to these people. But to some extent,
but if we do, we got to be cool. We can't be Buzz Killington. We got to be cool. We got to go in there and be like, "Hey, we're cool."
Well, value proposition, to the extent that these
being
people
a wet mop is not a high value proposition for anyone.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that, like you respect, so to say, his authority. He's already published a best-selling. He's already a best-selling author. He's already, a guest with lots of invites and lots of views. That he probably wants to speak to other people who are trying to develop thoughts, but he wants a friendly, like, I mean, have you read his book? Are you going to read his book? Are you going to buy his book? See some interviews.
Books are against my tradition to be. No, I don't want to say it's against my tradition to read books, but I have to read this guy's book to talk to him. Is that it?
It's a big part. Definitely. It's a systematic nature. So like, if you're a member of the Royal Academy, and when he spoke, you would be there in the audience. So there is no, phenomenon like that now where maybe, like I said, like if you paid, you're not of a stature, like you're not a professor, you're not head of an institute where you're going to be a participant at the the Science of Consciousness conference. You might be able to pay and buy a ticket that maybe if COVID-19's ever over, the restrictions, and that there's a conference and people met up, that you would be able to be a participant and ask a question after the presentation, or meet him in the hallway and ask a few questions. So if you had a paper, you could probably, so to say, get it published. You might be able to email it to him. You might, he might actually read it. Saying so, so other big names in the field.
Do you understand that the important bits can't be summarized in a paper with regards to this information?
Well, no, I'm saying he's the author. He wrote a book. He probably reads the periodicals of the new articles in the field. So like, no, I mean, that's the systematic method. You would publish a paper and he would read it. And then, just like you would speak to him in relationship to having read his work, he would speak to you in relation to having read your work. And if that's presumably the, like the system that most professionals operate in, if you don't operate you operate in according to alternative system, there's not really that much intersection between the two systems. That the professors and the best-selling authors make their rounds in certain circuits, and the spiritualists or the cultists make their realms in other circuits, and there's not much intersection.
Yeah, and that's okay. And that's why, this isn't about me getting recognition. This is about doing the right thing, whatever that may be, which involves having some difficult conversations, not rushing to publish something that may or may not actually get read by anyone.
Well, I'm saying because there's a matter of time, like, okay, people don't like to waste time. Time is valuable. The more accomplished you are, maybe the more valuable your time is. So that, and reading is a quicker way of ascertaining information. It's the quickest, most efficient way. So it's like, no, I mean, it's unlikely.
Says you.
Well, I mean, most of the
one with the knowledge sets the terms of how the knowledge comes about. And I didn't get my knowledge in books. And my system says that knowledge doesn't get transferred from books.
You haven't demonstrated that you have any knowledge worthwhile. And you don't have the resume of accomplishments that it would be presumptuous to assume that you actually do have any worthwhile knowledge.
That's your opinion. You're entitled to it. And other people are entitled to their opinions too.
Well, yeah, obviously. But I just saying, I mean, just on a factual basis, like you actually, so no, I mean, I think basically everybody at the Science of Consciousness conference is published.
So?
Saying that's the procedure, the protocol. If you don't want to follow it, you don't want to play by the rules. You're not.
I never said that. I just said maybe that's not the number one most important thing of all time. That's
you don't even have to discern motive, and just say that's. So I mean, I'm just saying it's kind of basic that reading is the main method of ascertaining information.
I've almost learned nothing from reading. So, that's how it works for you, great, but that's just not how it works for me.
Yeah, I'm saying the vast majority of people
of books
is information is ascertained from reading.
Not self-study or experience. Like people who learn how to be photographers, I think they learn that from actually going out and taking photographs mostly.
Yeah, experience, but I mean, knowledge is ascertained through reading. And almost all experts in the field well, I mean, you could demonstrate just time efficiency. Like that reading, you could read 600 words. Your average person with higher level education reads at least 500-600 words a minute with comprehension, and your average person talks about 150-200 words a minute. So just in time efficiency, and you're just the realm of ideas, that if you want to ascertain ideas, you don't need the emotion or theatrics. That the idea, it's separate from the person, and it's been separated into the idea in the written form. There's multiple reasons why reading's I mean, if you're going to scientifically conclude, like, I mean, it may be beyond the ability of science to conclude.
Reading hasn't given you the ability to judge the validity of my theory.
Well, even to communicate your theory.
I've
even to say that you have a theory.
Well, it's maybe not jumping through the hoops of what you'd call a theory.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even me. I'm saying, what they taught me in school and what most credentialed
Being
people.
learned is not about what they taught you in school. It's about what you thought about what they taught you and what you came to, what insights you got as a result of constantly contemplating the different processes and systems that you were presented, not just thinking that an average of things that you read is somehow better than one book really well.
I mean, we run in circles, but saying that, you could be like, oh, I have such useful, great things to say. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Obviously I'm talking to you, like, I hope you do it. Like, I think you do. But
I'm just distraught because you don't trust your own judgment to say one way or the other whether it's right. And what does it even mean for something to be right?
Well, I think that's why I went over and say that has to be accepted by the experts. It has to be understood and accepted by credentialed experts in the field.
Says you.
Well, it says me. That says says the experts in the field. Says the system.
Okay.
And so, I mean,
where I come from, what makes someone an expert is the ability to tell what knowledge is. So it's a bit of a cultural
have this
clash.
Argument for 3 years now and saying, like, no, you still haven't published, you still haven't become accepted, you still haven't entered like any of these circles, and saying it's unlikely you will, and saying that's why, so that you have to evaluate yourself to the process, and if you don't evaluate yourself to the process, the likelihood that you achieve the results is basically none. So I mean, it's like, God forbid, the dumb song, like you've been going to the dealership a long time, you haven't bought one. Like you've been running your mouth a few years now. Like it's time for the accomplishments. The accomplishments aren't there.
I guess when I see, quantum computers and photonics and stuff, I see that as something. I don't want to say it's because of me that people understand that, but I see that as knowledge being pushed
I don't think
forward.
anyone thinks it's because of you that people understand it. I mean, as far as I don't think there's a single person, including in your audience, that think that has anything to do with you.
Except for someone who actually looked at the timeline.
No, I don't think. I don't think there's a single person watching this that thinks that any of that has anything to do with you. I mean, you might follow it. You might be interesting to people that you hear someone talk about it that they could relate with, but like no one thinks that you're
lying.
None of them thinks that like you're one of the great minds, advancing those theories or technology.
Oh, and Nick has asked a good question in the chat, like, what's the value of Thad's thing? Well, to some extent, there's a value intrinsically to it. I'm trying to find the right diagram here. Yeah, there's an intrinsic value. Well, did you want to comment on the intrinsic value of what Wolfram's project is? Did you have opinions on that?
Well, of his software or his
because I guess I see the hyperbolic figure eight complement as just as much Thad as a Wolfram project thing. Like, just wouldn't have happened without that computer. Right? Anyway. Why is Thad's description? So it's not just that anyway, but it's because it is a geometric representation of non-locality that bears direct, non-trivial, i.e. more information than the sphere semblance on causality. And if you can learn to perceive that form, it's even more powerful than being able to model things as spheres, which is basically where physics is at now. Is, I sort of say, stuck in the second dimension where, we can't solve Schrodinger equation past hydrogen. We can't do gravity with more than a two-body problem. That there's something structurally, just computationally, it's just not clicking. So Thad is just a very passionate person who, through his own sort of brute force algorithm and intuitions, discovered that this happens to be a perfect model for 3+1 dimensional entanglement that supposedly has connection to something. But just be clear that it's not just Thad who discovered that. And I'm just using it because it lines up with what I already know to be true in terms of the causal order and its computational limit. Thank you for the question.
I still have Wolfram's books on my desk. I mean, they're my dad's books, actually. That
the fact is, the man is one of the better modern day. I don't even know what you want to call it. Polymath. I know nobody wants to hear me say polymath again, but just putting it out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's unclear his accomplishment. I mean, he's saying that he actually has a software program, a company. Whether his approach to science is meaningful or not is unclear. Computationally, and he actually has quite a resume. But even in terms of his scientific ideas, it's unclear whether that's an accomplishment or not, and whether it's going to lead to anything. Or if it's an approach that will provide new answers or insights. It's even unclear whether they've been around for quite a few years now, whether they provided any new insights or discoveries in science is unclear, as far as I understand. But he still has the software. He still has so maybe better than Eric Weinstein or something like that. Say, okay, like he had credentials, he studied, he definitely accomplishments in academically in the study of science. He was able to, if he didn't do it himself, to develop a team that created a powerful software for solving mathematical problems. But does he actually have any discoveries? Is his new theory have any validity or worth?
I just thought pedagogically unclear. That he was very strong because he's always looking for the physical link to mathematical theorems, really grounded in reality. Does he even have a theory, though? It seems more like it's a framework for theories. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's unclear what he has. I mean, if it's just patterns, computation, or if it's even like a new form of like number theory or combinatorics.
Brute force backdooring type stuff. It's from what Thad said, it can show you possible connections between the computations that you carry out, essentially your own, whatever strikes your fancy type of thing. I suppose you could run families of equations just to see if they did anything interesting on large enough intervals type thing.
And has it even solved something that hasn't been solved before? Has it even, done anything? And I'm not sure it has. So
sorry, what? You not sure it has done what?
That it's solved any equation or problem that previously hadn't been solved.
What does?
Whether Wolfram's paradigm has done that, as far as I know.
Well, it enabled Thad to make the discovery that he did, which still needs to be worked out, but has some very important insights for physics. And to get math to give self-evident results relevant to physics is pretty dang hard, considering no one seems to see the problem with calculus being physically wrong in its axioms, yet working really well. and that we're insisting that theories represent reality. No one's seeing that that trichotomy is not possible to have all those things be the case at the same time.
Yeah, so I said that's what I was saying earlier. You could just sidestep it like imaginary numbers that you don't need to understand what they mean.
I'm not going to sidestep something so crucial. I mean, don't you think that's imprudent? And hey, Jason, nice to see you. Really great.
No, if they work, they work. That you don't have to understand them or have a philosophy. Just saying they work, so we use them.
Right, but we're reaching the limits of we'll work. It works, so we'll use it. There's a limit to how far that actually works. It decouples from applicability in heavily self-referential regions like consciousness.
Well, no, I'm saying that I mean these theorems have been around, and they continue to work in new realms and fields, like fiber optics,
No, they don't.
information processing, sound compression.
They don't work. Brute forcing works. Models don't work. Brute forcing works. Models don't work.
Well, I mean, that's in the imaginary models, say transforms using imaginary numbers, work, and they continue to work in new realms. Even if there hasn't been any advancement on what it actually means, what's actually happening within the phenomenon, doesn't mean that the phenomenon hasn't been able to be used for more and more working forms of engineering.
So, if we can account for why it's successful, maybe we can get past the perceptual limitations that its framework imposes.
Yeah, maybe unrelated. That, I mean, if you come up with a advancement in the philosophy of science, that it could have no implications to technology. So I mean, it could be Wolfram computation might have implications to technology, but not actually to mathematics or even computing. That if it doesn't create any new theorem or understanding of math or science, but it creates more computational power.
It's about time varying rules. So the question is, what system can be modeled by time varying rules? Essentially.
Well, more computations could be made, so not even necessarily what a model, but
he refers to rulal space. I mean, there are people who know far more about his work than me in that chat right now, so please go ahead and fill us in.
Yeah, I still haven't even got to his book, but yeah, I guess I'm going to sign off, and hopefully people stick to the research. If you want to keep it going, feel free. So, anything else you want to say before I sign off?
Thanks for the encouragement, and looking forward to the next one. And I'll keep working on putting something together for Jason. I don't want to say I want to do a publication right now, but we'll start with Jason and see what feedback his colleagues can give me, because they did sound qualified to do so.
Yeah, well, I'm saying, I mean, he could probably, but anyone could really do that. Saying once you have something in writing, it's easy to submit. I mean, that's the main hump, is for you to formally write something up. That once you have it written up, getting it in front of people to look at it is, like the main hump is you writing your paper. But yeah, okay. So take care. Have a good week.
You too. Best luck on your studies. Blessings. All right. Well, I'll be right back. If anyone has any questions, I see Daryl's already got a. That's actually a pretty good question that Daryl's got there. And I'll be back momentarily. I'm going to try to find some sort of a clip here to play once I can see. Oh, there we go. Welcome back. All right, so, okay. I remember the last thing I saw was Daryl asking, well, what prediction is relativity make? What is quantum mechanics predict? See, the thing about Daryl is he doesn't actually have answers to these questions, does he? No. His answers, well, the answers he has are crap. He's convinced quantum mechanics has done nothing. I don't really want to have that combo. It's like if you don't think math is valuable, I'm going to say self-instantiated in terms of its validity, I don't care to try to convince you, whatever. Let me know when that changes. I don't really, it's a bit tough to say what quantum predicts because it's very, very general to say quantum mechanics. It's almost like energy. Someone was trying to pin me down to define energy, and I said, colloquially in physics, when you refer to energy, the subtext is that it is the most general thing. So quantum mechanics is analogous to that in the sense that it's the most general way we can reference a class of observational results coincided with the Copenhagen interpretation. The thing is, you can look back prior to that and establish, well, okay, I guess they kind of knew about quantum mechanics for these reasons because it's so vague that, like, what is really quantization? You can go back to, I want to say, Zeno's paradox here, the infinite subdivision paradox. To me, that proves some measure that space is not infinitely divisible. That concept is not an accurate model because it self-refutes when you try to model it as though it were true. You can argue that that is proof of quantization. Well, if it's not continuous, it's quantized because that's all there is, folks. Arguably, yes. And Daryl would like to know, what does relativity predict? Yes, indeed. Really depends what axioms you take. So I would say you can derive your basic transformations. Those are time dilation and length contraction. Those can be predicted from attributes, mechanical attributes, so train, velocity, and the speed of light being constant. That's not how that understanding arose. People like T-Jump who don't really understand science, they're acting, like it's not science unless you land 747 on a dime. Oh, you got to predict something that's never been predicted before with a theory that you've never checked before, pretty much by sheer luck. It's like, no. You just want to know what's in the future. Doesn't matter who discovered it first. It doesn't matter anything other than what's best suited to the task, which we'll be able to do if we can actually drill down on what the task is. Question, answer, I don't want to say paradox, but dichotomy. So since relativity was, I don't want to say an explanatory framework, but really an integral framework, I don't know that you can say it predicts. It's more of a unifying principle that, space and time are emergent from the speed of light being a constant. Something about the speed of light. Has anyone actually articulated that? Probably not. Does the result point to that? I would say yes, but the basic derivation of special relativity is a train. So you're looking at a Pythagorean paradigm and constancy of speed of light. Looks like Jason wants to come on. That's such a blessing to me. Hopefully my computer doesn't give up on life itself when I go to send this link, because I certainly don't want to put it in the chat. We definitely don't want that. Ooh, that rhymed. That's fun. No one says Wolfram's rules are fixed, but he has gone meta to rules that affect rules. Well, if the rules are fixed, that's pretty good, because the rules being fixed. If the laws of physics admit a decomposition with equations, big if they do, then they'd be fixed, right? So that's fine. I must have misunderstood. I actually would say there's probably an application of both, depending on how loosely you want to define a rule. But really what it's going to come down to is successive boundary instantiation, really nothing more and nothing less than that. It is quickly going to become geometrically complicated. But the way to sort of fold that into the process is to make the numbers essentially as complicated, to divide the complexity between the numbers and the geometry. If that's that helps clear it up. So Daryl, again, does it predict them or describe them? Like, what's the difference between a prediction and a description? You know, it's not purely semantics, because a description doesn't necessarily tell you what's going to happen in the future. A description more is a rationalization. A prediction is based on this reasoning, this will happen. And if it happens, it's like, oh, that's a point in support of the reasoning. If it doesn't mean the reasoning was wrong. It just means that in that instance, that reasoning doesn't predict the effect every time. That's where, you know, the art, quote unquote, and what we saw Euler getting into a little bit of science is, when do you know you're supposed to scrap your hypothesis? When is it a tear down? When do we have to say, okay, well, it's just time to reframe from the lowest resolution possible? And the way I would look at it is that every time you want to reframe from the lowest resolution possible, not just in science. And the point of that is to have the greatest range of experience, the greatest depth, if experience can be analogized as an image, somehow color balanced, optimized image. Forgive the cheesy metaphor here. I'm trying to get this link sent. And my computer is going about the speed of, I can't think of an acceptable, can't even think of an acceptable word here. All right, let's keep going. Yeah, so prediction and description, they're going to line up in some cases, but the prediction is unique in that it happens before the event in question. And it can be validated as such, whereas a description is more what seems right, but can't be established as right with any type of precision in advance of the description. So that is a good distinction to make. But yeah, there's a fair bit of interpretation in all systems, even in math. Jason says prediction is the main component, but there are facets of science that don't rely on prediction. Yeah, exactly. I mean, what, like, how much of science relates to calculus? You know, is calculus based on predictions? No, it's based on an exact solution to something, an exact solution to what appears to be an infinite limit. Under a Euclidean paradigm, which other highly compelling results suggest is wrong on a physical level, calculus coming in and saying it doesn't even matter, well, it might be interesting to account for why. It works in spite of itself. Parmendi says, I'm sure Stephen will work it out. He enjoys research so much. It's just fun, I think. When you enjoy the process, results follow naturally. Well, what kind of results are we talking about here? Because you can't delegate upwards. So you can't think that plugging numbers into a calculator is the same thing as understanding physical processes. So I've sent that link. Please let me know if you got it, Jason. And if you still want to come on. It must be getting late there. Not too sure. All right. So, whoopsie. Seems like Daryl is just annoying everybody at this point. I was like, is it just me? Am I being too sensitive? But no. Daryl's just combative or pedantic. I'm not sure what it is, but you wonder what the point is sometimes. Maybe if you didn't change subjects so abruptly, Daryl would be less annoying, or conceded that what you said was, you know, some nonsense. You know what I mean? All right, I finally got back to where I actually was. Yeah, like, I understand that desire to constantly criticize, but if it's not matched with some valuable knowledge, it's kind of just annoying, Daryl. Yeah, Jason validates this predictions being a main part about hypothesis testing. Yeah. It's two different arguments, just to make that note very clear, that the main justification for science being understood as its ability to make predictions and accounting for the success of science / technology, those are actually different questions. It's very important to distinguish them. Is there some benefit science provides that does not rely on the predictive power of science? Well, it's a good question. I don't know if it's for Daryl or me, but perhaps if we're generous enough with the definition of science, then yeah, we could include some results from physics which are derived from numerical methods, which, unlike most physics, don't have a physical reality. All right. Andrew says the Rulliad is one single changeless chunk, it seems to me. Okay, well, you know, that's fine. It's not just about what's changeless, it's about the relative load of computation that the different things are bearing. So right now, all the computation is on brute forcing these infinities. We want to switch that up, integrate the infinities meaningfully. And so have, you know, even if we can't get quantum computers working right away, we can simulate parallel processing, which is what the power of quantum computers is. In theory. In the chat. Hey. So Jason, are you coming on? I haven't seen any comments. I thought you said that you would, but let's see here. See if he's still here. Oh, I see you just messaged. So are you coming on? And did you get the link? Let's see here. Oh, he's still here. Jason, what's up? Just want to see if we're doing this or not, because we got 15 people watching. I'm good to keep going. Okay. Armandi says this was the pragmatism versus logicism debate from the 18th century. Yeah. Maybe we're stalled out in history, in the past, in regards to certain questions. So is the statement, knowledge has no value unless you can use it, is that a reasonable assertion? So Anders says, Zeno's paradoxes are still problematic. Agree, despite some seeming claims that the paradoxes have been solved. They haven't, at least not in continuous space and time. Well, that's sort of what the paradox establishes, is that continuous space and time is not possible. But knowing what a thing is not, and then knowing what is actually there in the place of the thing that was originally identified as, which was just an illusion, that's a big undertaking. Yeah, so an initial condition, Nolan's saying that it's resting on an initial condition. That's not the end of the world. I mean, what you want is a system whose initial conditions can be arbitrarily instantiated as whenever you started your experiment, with all the information about the laws of physics pre-built in a meaningful way, as to simulate microstates, modelizing a system as to predict most likely outcomes based on a statistical distribution. I mean, come on, that's just obvious. So Jason says, again, predictions equated to model validation in my field. It does depend a bit on the field. I'll admit my field is so small, was so small when I worked in it. It was a lot more than just like predictions, or at least something that's super well defined. It's more about minimizing the risk of a miscarriage of justice there. So it's a little more complicated, but yeah, most scientists would agree, I think, that making predictions is part of the process of validating a model. And looks like there's this huge hair-splitting debate about valuation and tail chasing about whether valuation and utilitarianism something. Age-old empiricism versus rationalism showdown. Okay. Well, I guess it's good to get the opinions out there. My view is that the Wolfram model starts with a single self-relation, but that doesn't seem what the Wolfram team is using. They start with something like infinite dimensions. Okay, well, it's not just about on paper, it's under the hood. How is the processor implementing the computation? That's almost more important. It's like almost about designing code to trick the system into displaying how it computes on some sort of simulator. And yeah, there's a deeper question here. So Daryl says science isn't nature. Really? There's two conflicting things. Calculus works because it's not real. Gives us valuable information because it's not real. So scientific models, if they have to reflect reality, and a non-real model gives us the right information, think about that. The definitions, conclusion, definitions, etc. Desired outcomes need to be process relational, i.e. you start by defining the desired outcome. And if it's not specific, keep going into making more specific desired outcome. Rather than try to say, oh, I don't want to boundary instantiated needs to be justified. Really hard to do that, let alone a whole bunch of them. So by instantiating a bunch of boundaries, you're essentially trivializing them. All right, so I guess we're coming to the end of it. I don't think Jason's gonna come on, so maybe next time. And it's been a good talk, pretty long show. Sorry about the breakdown and my tech in the middle of the show. Oh, that was interesting what you said, Nolan. The inconsistency in nature leads to a statistical model of quantum physics. That's not inconsistency, that's resolution. That's actually that's a consistency effect. So that's an effect of the waveform nature of causality. Look up something called the Nyquist effect. It's very interesting. Actual connection to real signal processing that you don't really know on some scale when the sampler and the sampled have the same frequencies. You don't know what the hell you're perceiving, and you could be perceiving it way wrong. If nature was not consistent, we couldn't. If nature was not consistent, we couldn't science. If science made zero predictions, it would have no value. Yeah, I think, partial accounting, the majority shareholder on science. Yeah, it's predictions. There might be other stuff, but let's not deny that predictions are the central value of science versus other approaches to knowledge. Well, yeah, the Nyquist sampling rate. I mean, if everything functions on the basis of waveforms, then sampling theory will be central to understanding how those waveforms transfer information between them. Value in all theories is our ability to employ them to control nature, predicting how we'll respond because nature is consistent. That's a purely materialistic view. So that's a bit of a different question as to what the right utility is of this type of technology, but that'll be a question for another day. Oh yes, Daryl, everyone knows that about the Nyquist limit. All right, take care. We'll see everyone real soon.